Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and we're a little over halfway into the year 2024, and I'm using a little over generously there, and one of my favorite discussions of every year is just what is Game of the Year. It's a good time to take stock at just what came out, the variety of experiences that were released, and just talk about some really good games. So let's do a mid of the year, or as people would normally say, mid-year update for what my personal Game of the Year would be. As a bit of context, I ordinarily think what should win Game of the Year at a lot of the award shows is the game that has the most impact in a positive way on the gaming scene on the whole. In 2022, I thought this was overwhelmingly Elden Ring, and then in 2023, this was overwhelmingly Baldur's Gate 3. And funnily enough, those are also my favorite games that came out in those years. But 2024 is a bit different, because at least at this point, there hasn't really been a game for 2024 like Elden Ring was for 2022, or Baldur's Gate 3 was for 2023. I think the closest we got was Helldivers 2. But personally, I'm just not all that into multiplayer games nowadays. I get bored rather quickly, and I think the hype on the whole has also died down significantly for Helldivers 2 ever since the Sony controversy, with them wanting PC players to link a PlayStation Network account. Not the only reason, but it was like one of the big turning points. But with the back end of 2024 looking as busy as it is with Black Myth Wukong, Metaphor V Fantasio, Sparking Zero, and a whole bunch of other games. Before we really dive into that element, 2024 was kind of the year of the DLC for me, where two big DLC/expansion packs came out for games I really care about. Shadow of the Erdtree for Elden Ring, but also Dawn Trail for Final Fantasy XIV. This year had a big disappointment for me when it came to Dragon's Dogma 2. The game just didn't really click for me. It didn't run on my old PC, and I kind of moved on from it when I got my new PC that could run it. I think Persona 3 Reload is really good, but it still retains some of the key issues that I have with P3 that holds it back just enough compared to what I think my Game of the Year is going to end up being for 2024 and what it currently is, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I love this game, and I love it so much, but it's also a game of two stories for me. There's a lot of elements to this game that I flat out do not like. I think there's a lot of time-wasty animations or just mechanics in Rebirth, or just design choices overall, like scaling towers being kind of convoluted, certain animations just taking a while. There's other elements I'm just not a fan of, like their refusal to implement a jump button for some reason, and possibly an over-reliance on minigames, and some of those minigames being either frustrating or just tedious or boring to me. Having said that, the reason I rate and think of Rebirth so highly is because the things that I do like so much about it, I like them to such a degree, to such a high that they overshadow the flaws that the game has for me. I am in love with the characters, the world, the combat, the story going on, the plot, the dialogue, the writing, the tonal shifts, the comedy. There's so many elements of Rebirth specifically that I love so much that I've only come to like and appreciate even more since I've beaten the game. I loved 7 Remake as well, but it had a few crippling issues for me. One being extremely linear corridor-based level design, because it's trying to emulate that feeling of linearity and claustrophobia that Midgar from the base game had. But the problem is that was only a 5-hour section-ish in the original FF7 compared to Remake being a full 40-hour game. But also, side content was a bit lacking in Remake, doubled up with, in my opinion, poor enemy variety in the back end. Those issues just don't exist in Rebirth. I think the level design on the whole is far better. Lord knows there's enough side content in Rebirth as well, but also the enemy design and variety is so much better in Rebirth, not to mention that I think the tweaks and modifications they made to the combat system in Rebirth make every fight more enjoyable. The synergy attacks and skills do so much for the pace and the variety of the combat. And the game is way more free-form, with allowing us to select different party members and compositions that can synergize with each other in different ways, getting us entire new abilities that we can utilize that are really fun. The customization is also a massive step up, and just on the whole, I think a lot of the elements and systems from Remake are just more refined and better implemented in Rebirth. You couple just how fun the combat is in Rebirth with just how much there is to actually do in Rebirth, and you not only get a game that's high in quality but also in quantity. I think the open world has kind of devolved to this very basic and stereotypical checklist of things to do in it, and there's some open world zones that I think are just frustrating to navigate around, Gaga being the main offender here, but quite a few of the side quest chains in Rebirth are quite enjoyable. They flesh out the world, they flesh out certain characters that I really wanted fleshing out. They expand on the interpersonal dynamics of the party members as well, or fleshing out their individual character or even development. Or they introduce really interesting boss fights, or just scenarios that lead to boss fights, and it's great. In a lot of ways, Rebirth reminds me of what I love about Final Fantasy on the whole, and that is being able to blend these really over-the-top, lighthearted, and comedic scenes, and juxtapose those with the really depressing, dark, and emotional storytelling that Final Fantasy, and especially 7, is known for. I think it helps that 7 by itself had one of my favorite cast of characters of any game ever, and I think Remake and especially Rebirth are really honing in on that cast and making them even better by giving them additional scenes, the voice acting and writing being phenomenal, and just on the whole really honing in on the elements of these characters that I really liked. I understand that Rebirth is not going to be for everybody, but it absolutely is for me. It's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, and there's a lot of issues and things that I hope don't get carried over to the third game that I've already talked about in this video, but I don't want to overstate the flaws in comparison to just how many good things there are in this game. Queen's Blood is an amazing card game, and I'm a sucker for when these games can have a side activity or a side game in it all of itself. Like you had Gwent in The Witcher 3, Final Fantasy being a franchise known for having card games inside of it, and I think Queen's Blood is one of the best iterations of it. There's a shocking amount of playstyles and different builds you can go for. The progression system is actually rather good and simple. The rhythm game with the piano can be extremely frustrating if you don't have the muscle memory, or if you're just starting out, but if you give it time and try and get better at it, it can weirdly flow and make sense and then click, and it's fun and it's nice. You don't have to do it, and that's one of the big things with Rebirth. Even for the minigames that you don't end up liking, you don't have to do them that much. Even if they're part of the main story, you only have to do them at a surface level, and then you can ignore them and just disregard them. And if there's a minigame that you end up really liking, you can then dive into it and get really good at it and go for like all the accolades and awards that go alongside that. And I think that is where I really came to appreciate Rebirth, is when I stopped approaching it with the idea that I have to complete everything. I could just complete the things that I liked, and if I didn't like a particular thing, I could largely ignore it, or I'd only have to do it a little bit or at a surface level to get what I want out of it. I didn't have to go for the platinum trophy because some of those activities to get that platinum were off-putting to me. So I had a better time of the game just ignoring those elements and focusing in on the elements that I did like. And I love the story for Rebirth. Slight spoilers, though I'm not going to really hone in on specific elements too much, though I will just take a time to say spoiler warning from here on out. I don't even think Rebirth's story is necessarily all that complicated, or confusing, or convoluted. It's part 2 of a trilogy. Not everything is going to have a concrete answer right now, and that's fine. But I thought the things that needed to be ironed out and explained were. And when they went for the kind of quote-unquote multiverse thing they tried to do, I didn't even think it was all that bad, or all that confusing. It made sense in the context of the story that was being delivered since Remake. I don't want a story to necessarily force-feed every plot device and moment down my throat to make sure I understand it. Allow me to think and interpret. That's okay, and that's what Rebirth does. But it doesn't go too far in that direction either. You get a lot of concrete answers, but you also end up asking a lot of questions you want answered in the third game, and if they drop the ball with the third game, absolutely that's going to retroactively affect my opinions about Remake and Rebirth. But we don't have that game yet. I don't know how this story is going to end, because at the end of the day, this is different to original FF7, and that's okay. I also want them to make an actual remake / remaster of original FF7, but I love what we're getting here with Remake and Rebirth. and whatever the heck the third game's gonna be called. Final Fantasy VII Onion or something, I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, Game of the Year for you is gonna be whatever game you most enjoyed, or whatever game gave you the most memories for this year, and for me, that's Rebirth. It has its issues. It's not a 10 out of 10. It's not a perfect game, but it's a damn good one, with a lot of redeeming qualities and a lot of pivots in its direction from remake to make itself a more engaging product. And I think on the whole, it greatly succeeded in this. It's a game where I can go back to some of these cutscenes and I can still laugh just like I did when I first saw them, because they are that well written and they land that much for me. Comedy is subjective. What we like out of stories is subjective. What I can only say is that the things that are in Rebirth land for me. The emotional moments land for me. The funny moments land for me. The game is beautiful. The characters are great. And it gets right the important things that I look for in a game. Really fun gameplay, amazing characters, a great world to lose myself in, amazing music that I've come to expect out of Final Fantasy, a great story, one that compels me and makes me ask questions, makes me curious about what's going to happen next. It has fun side activities, and some really memorable moments. Some of my favorite games of all time are also some games that I have a lot of issues with, but the pros outweigh the cons significantly for me. A game like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I have a ton of issues with that game. It's still a top 3 game of all time for me. And I have a ton of issues with Rebirth. But at the end of the day, I love the game to death. And I can choose to focus in and hyper-focus in on the negatives, the issues, the cons that I have with it. Or I can choose to focus my time and energy on the things that I like. The things that I look back and say, you know what, that was an enjoyable experience that I'm glad I experienced. I had fun with this, and I'd rather do that. Because at the end of the day, it's more fun. At least it is for me. And that's been something that I've struggled with over the years, and it's something I'm actively trying to do more every time I play a new game, because I tend to find that when I focus in on the negatives or what I don't like about a game, I can find even more things that I would have brushed aside otherwise. But if I look out actively for the things that I do like, then I may enjoy things even more so than I would ordinarily, or I find new things to appreciate, and I end up enjoying myself more. So for those reasons, that is why at this point in time, unless something really good comes out that I also play and fall in love with, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is my game of the year so far for 2024. What a dang good year it's been. What a dang good year. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Leave a comment down below with what game for you is game of the year so far, and what game you are still really looking forward to coming out in 2024. Because the end of this year is really busy. There's a lot coming, and it don't stop coming, and it don't stop coming. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video and you want to see more content. I would greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again!